Welcome everybody. In today's video I'll be making an adjustable mouth miter plane. Alright, so first things first, start out with some precision ground steel. It just reduces the amount of work that I need to do in order to get pieces that are ready to build with. So after rough cutting it, then take it over to my little mill there and kind of even out my edges so I know I have two pieces that are exactly the same length, and that's what will be the sides. And then I go about drilling all of the holes that I need to pin the sides to the bottom. And now I'm just cutting away the section that's going to be the back, so I have plenty of clearance for the blade and my hand. And then just using the mill to kind of true everything up. Then over to the die filer, and then now I'm working on the bridge. This is what's going to hold the blade in tension. So rough cutting it on the bandsaw and then back over to the mill to clean up all of those saw cuts. And now I need to drill and tap to hold my knob. We'll make that a little bit later. And then off to the files to get a nice sharp corner there. Now here I'm actually putting in a little bit of decorative filing. So I'm doing something called a Cupid's bow. Picked this design element up from Bill Carter. Just a lot of careful filing. Start off making some V's and then rounding everything over, and you get this nice little decoration. And now just a little bit of cleanup. Get all that now because it's going to be much harder to do after it's installed. And now I'm just relieving the area to actually put that bridge in. So here I started making the knob, and I'm going to put some inlay in it with that's artificial ivory. So you cut up a big piece and then just started milling it down. And then I wanted to do a little more inlay inside of the inlay, so I have some walnut scrap there. I'm just going to break off a piece and turn it into a dowel. Now it's back to the lathe and just thinning it out, turning it fully round. And then some epoxy to hold it all in place. And I actually ended up having to make this a couple times. It gets pretty thin in there, and I ended up breaking some stuff off. Now back over to the lathe, and I can do some final shaping. And it's mostly just file work at this point. I found that was to be the easiest, and I had the most control. Just give you a little preview of what it's going to look like so far. So now I'm working on the bottom. The first thing I need to do is mill in the bed. So I got all this roughed out on the mill, and then it's over to files with a hardwood guide just to get it all cleaned up, and then some polishing with some sandpaper. And now I'm using the sides to transfer the holes to the sole. And now I can pin it all together. So all that hammering will actually displace the metal and lock it together, so then you can't pull it apart. Now this is actually the front mouth, the front part of the sole, and it'll sit in there, and I just milled out some space in there to help hold everything in alignment. Now the back side I needed to, actually ended up rounding it over so I had a place for the shavings to kind of eject. And now I can start trying to get all of that excess metal that was peened over off. And if you do it right, it'll fill up all of those holes and you won't have any gaps. And now it's on to making the hardware to allow that mouth to move and then lock it down in whatever position you set. So this is going to be the piece that kind of is like acts as a stop and what I'll actually lock against. So this will get installed into the front infill, and I'll show you a little more of that later. And so I ended up turning this out of a square bar. That allowed me to help hold it there in the mill for doing that milling operation. And then after I turned it and then milled it back to the lathe to level everything out, polish it up. And now this is going to be the set screw, and I couldn't find a commercial one that was going to work, so I'm going to modify this 1/4-20 bolt. And so what I'm doing here is I just want to flatten that bolt head out so I can turn it down and turn it into a full circle. And I'm going to end up turning that into a screw head. Now I probably could have ordered something, but this is what I had on hand, and this was practice for another plane that I'm going to be making in the future. And so after I got it flattened out and turned, I went ahead and just filed and then sawed in the slot for a screwdriver. Kind of see how that works. That's just going to go in there, and that slot is going to allow it to move forward and backwards. And now this is going to actually be a depth stop for that mouth plate, and it's kind of the similar function. Lathe it out of a square bar and then over to the mill to do some drilling operations. And then another custom screw. So I think that's like a 5 mil by 1/2 mil threaded rod, something like that. So very, very fine adjustment. And I'm going to do a similar operation there I'm going to peen over the top of that, so it just kind of helps further lock it together. I'm going to turn that into my own screw as well. And this was another one where I couldn't find something that was commercially available, so I ended up modifying what I had on hand. And to get that started, I used a center punch, and that just helps spread out that metal so I can fill up all the gaps. And I started with a little too much metal sticking up, and it really started to split it out, but it wasn't really a big deal because I was able to turn all of that out and get down to good metal, and then just a little bit of shaping there on the lathe with some files, and then again cut in the screw slot. And you can kind of see how that's going to go together. So now I can start working on the infills. These are made from cherry. So the person that this ended up going to requested cherry infills, so that's what we're doing. And it's a pretty small block, so it really wasn't worth it to run it through a jointer and a planer, so it was all just hand tools that worked down fairly easily. And this is just a lot of plain test fit, plain test fit. I didn't want to overshoot it, go too deep. Now, once I had it to width, I could go ahead and cut it again, cut it to height. I was just back to the bandsaw for that. And that block actually ended up making both the front and the rear infills. And now I'm back on the rear infill, and I am cutting the bed in. So that'll match up to the bed that we had milled and filed earlier. And the whole thing is going to be held in by a couple of bolts, so I am using some threaded inserts, and I'm using the drill press here to get those threaded inserts started and started straight, so they're right in line with how they were drilled, and then I can finish it off with the impact driver. And in doing so, that actually raised the wood up a little bit, almost like a burr. So just planing it off. I'm not planing the metal, I'm just taking off the little bit of extra that was kind of popping up. And now I can go ahead and flatten the bed out, check for square, and just get that trued up. And make sure I stamp it. And at this point I realized I needed to relieve a little bit of space so I could allow that front plate to move back and forth. So I just went at it with the router plane. And now that should drop in and just be able to move backwards and forward. And that was just me cleaning off the front, leveling that out, and now I'm installing that ferrule that's going to allow the plate to lock down. And then this is the hole that's going to be for the depth stop. So that'll drop in there, get screwed down. And then just cleaning it up with some files and then sandpaper. Then just a little bit of some finish, so it looks all nice. And then I decided to round over the back just to make it feel a little nicer in the hand while you are holding it, using it. So the easiest thing to do here was just hacksaw and files. And this really didn't take too long. And then I'm doing some roundovers just to kind of make it a little nicer to hold. And now I need to work some more on the front plate. I need to put in a stem so that screw that I made earlier can actually go into something. And so I just turned up a piece and then peened that over, and then back to the infill to relieve a spot for that to go, and you can kind of see how that works. So the front plate there just drops in. It can only move forward and backwards, and then that screw up there you can see is moving forward and backwards, and then when you lock it down, you can't move anymore. And then now that I'm happy with the way that mouth plate is working, I'm just going to do a little more shaping. So cut away a bulk on the bandsaw and then off to the files to get it all nice and clean. And now that I'm happy with everything, I'm just going to epoxy that ferrule in place. I'm just using the screwdriver there to make sure that slot is running perfectly parallel with the sides. And then I can do all my cleanup, flattening, all that kind of fun stuff. Now here is an offcut from the bed. And that's actually going to go on to the blade itself, and the blade is going to act as the handle for this type of plane. So it's just bandsaw to get it down, and then I can clean it up with a hand plane. And now I figured out the easiest thing to do would be to just take it over the sander. It's attached to the blade at the moment, and then I can just take off all the excess with that. And then now I'm just doing a round over. Don't do this. This is super sketchy, but I did it, but you really shouldn't do it. This definitely is a job for a router table. And then now I'm just going to blend everything out with some files. And then sandpaper to get rid of all the burn marks. And then some more finish. Now the blade just needs a little bit of attention. It was in pretty good shape as it was, but I just made sure the back was nice and flat. And then went ahead and sharpened it up. Now this is actually a bevel up plane, you can see there, so I think there's a 30-degree angle on that. Now some testing just to make sure it works. Ended up going back and forth in the testing phase, just dialing it in. But I eventually got it working really well on kind of everything I threw at it.
So I think we can call this one done. I am incredibly thrilled with the way this turned out. Hopefully the person that this is going to enjoys it as much as I do. If you want to help support the channel, please check out the website. I post tools up there for sale. I'm working on a bunch more in the background, so those will go up just as soon as I get them done. So I think that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for following along, and I'll catch you on the next one.